me for grain. Like it, son. This is going to hurt!
Back in 1984, there was this weird sci-fi horror flick that came out called Dreamscape. While it had Dennis Quaid in it, who is a pretty famous Hollywood actor, there was another guy that embodied the bad guy persona so perfect back then, David Patrick Kelly. He also played in the iconic movie The Warriors, which had a great PS2 game done in his homage. Anyways, the principal idea behind the movie Dreamscape was having this dude, who was a bad baddie played by David, have the ability to enter other people's dreams and manipulate it. At the time, it was a really scary and great introduction into the idea of entering people's dreams. I think also the 80s focused a lot on this dream state, as Nightmare on Elm Street built an entire franchise around this idea. So I also feel that the people that made Ravenloft Dreamscape must have been a fan of those older horror flicks, as this module for Neverwinter Nights 2 revolves around this principal notion in detail. The module will enter you into a staging area, and if you use a new character, it will auto level you up to level 11. If you really push it during the playthrough, you can hit level 12 by the end, but just a note, none of your henchmen will gather enough XP to level up again. Puzzles are light, roleplay is almost nil, and combat is heavy. There's also light traps involved. While not mentioned, there's an upgrade that's really needed. It's a magical longsword that's going to help you defeat about a quarter of the enemies. The reason I mentioned that is you want to make sure to have someone in your party that can actually swing it. Otherwise, this module's difficulty hits a pretty high spike. Actually, I recommend only using OP builds for this one, because weaker builds to just play around with will get absolutely creamed. While the enemy types will be varied, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on, there is a ton of undead. This is Ravenloft after all. With all that being said, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Let's go ahead and dive in. The opening to Ravenloft Dreamscape has our hero stumbling into the town of Mordenshire. It's pretty barren of people, but the locale is interesting with its buildings, and it really makes the player feel like investigating the few little shops that are open and the mayor's house. All this is because the hero doesn't know what the hell is going on, how we even ended up being here. But as the breadcrumbs begin to unravel, we realize that it all points in the direction of a man named Strahd, which will eventually lead us to Castle Ravenloft as well. There are a few small side quests to explore, but none of them are really top notch here. For instance, there's a fetch quest to get some books for the local church, which could have been a little bit more fleshed out and filled in the area a little bit more with detail and attention to world building. Instead, it just really felt hollow. Or there's another quest of finding a girl missing, where you only just eventually stumble across her later, and there's no real resolution to the side quest. You just get XP and it ends. I guess what it comes down to is that you're going to do the side quest for the sake of the XP, because it's otherwise really skimp in a 6+ hour module. There are also sections of respawning mobs. It took me a few minutes and desperately running out of supplies before I figured out to stay alive that I needed to get the hell out of there. Luckily, you only have to travel a short distance and enter a new area to get away. Also, the respawning mobs don't offer hardly any XP, but are difficult to deal with, so I don't really see this as a way to grind out XP if you want to get more. What really grabs the player in this module is the twists and turns. One minute the PC is running around gathering chests or killing bad baddies, only to stumble into a section that transports them to a different time or location with companions that are confused as to what you're even talking about, only then to realize that maybe you were experiencing a dream. But then the boundaries between what is a dream and what is real begins to meld together until you don't know if you're in a dream or if you're in the real world. While this may confuse the player a little bit, I think this is done in a very good way. The less known, the better. While not all of it is fleshed out as I would have liked, it carries that main beat of the story forward, and it's really all you can ask for in the end. The use of assets in the areas also creates an atmosphere that speaks of Ravenloft. Everything is dark and mysterious. As I mentioned earlier, just the absence of regular town folks can seem eerie, or stumbling into a house to only encounter a woman that seems to be slipping into madness. It all helps to create this atmosphere that you want in this type of setting. unknown dread. One of my main gripes about this module itself is the unbalanced use of monsters. While there are plenty of undead, you also stumble across monster types that just really don't fit that narrative at all. Also, the balancing on some of the encounters makes you scratch your head. Without giving too much away, it just isn't like your typical progression where you fight a goblin, then an orc, and finally something like a troll. It's like you might fight the troll first and then the goblin later. At times this really kind of puzzled me, so there's no easing you into the flow of combat in this module. Just be ready to roll with it from the get-go and you shouldn't have a problem. Getting back to the atmosphere, the music selection can be very barren at times. Instead, what you have is like this nice feeling of ambience in the background. The sounds of a dark forest night, for example. That isn't to say that the music selection doesn't have some appeal and fit the mood, and you will stumble across sections that just really knock that out, but here you go. Here's a little short piece to listen to. Ravenloft Dreamscape is really a hit or a miss. I get a lot of what they're trying to do in creating this module. It's like an introduction to Ravenloft in a way. You encounter some of the main characters found in the realm and also get a little bit of an idea of what this land represents. It also fills you in a nice story of what or who Strahd is. The goals and ambitions of this character is so iconic to the Dungeons & Dragons. If someone has never read or played in the Ravenloft setting, then this module is actually a pretty decent starting point. Also, if someone is a fan of Ravenloft, I think they would actually enjoy this module as well. In the end, that's really what it comes down to if I'm going to recommend this module to somebody. It's either a great starting point or if you like Ravenloft. Otherwise, it's just an okay module in itself. Well, that's going to be a wrap for this review. Remember to like and subscribe for more content. It's just a little click and it really helps out. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. Have a great day gaming. Later.